You know, there's something inherently lonely about a hotel lobby late at night. That hum of the fluorescent lights, the smell of old carpet and industrial cleaner, that feeling of being in a place that's between places. Everyone passing through, leaving only whispers and rumpled sheets behind. The stories I get sent about hotels, they hit different. They're not about haunted houses, where a family's grief soaked into the walls. They're about places built for forgetting, where the walls are designed to hold no memories. But sometimes, the memories stick, and sometimes, things check in that don't ever check out. This one came in from a man who managed a particular hotel for the better part of a decade. He asked that I don't use the real name or the real town. He said the people who need to know already do. For us, let's just call it the Evergreen Lodge and say it was somewhere in the dense, rainy pine forests of the Pacific Northwest, off a state highway that seems to lead nowhere. His email was long, detailed. It wasn't just a scary story. It was a confession of sorts, a ledger of things seen and heard, and more importantly, things permitted. Here it is, in his words. My name is Leo. Back in 2008, after let's call it a strategic retreat from corporate life in Seattle, I took the manager job at the Evergreen Lodge. It was a 3-story, U-shaped motel from the 1960s. The kind with exterior corridors and doors that groaned like they were in pain. The place was owned by a taciturn older couple, the Dawsons, who lived in Florida and only cared about the money order I mailed them every month. Their sole instruction was, keep it quiet and keep it full. The clientele was exactly what you'd expect. Truckers catching a mandated 8 hours. Tourists too cheap for the chain hotels an hour south. Salesmen with defeated eyes. And then there were the long-term residents. The ones who lived in the weekly rate rooms on the back side of the U, overlooking the dripping firs instead of the parking lot. The Evergreen was their world. That's where my story really lives. With them, my first week, the night auditor, a guy named Marvin, who'd been there since the Nixon administration, gave me what he called the ghost tour. It wasn't about spirits. It was about the living. See room 118, he rasped, lighting a cigarette off the stove coil in the back office. Old man Henderson. Been here 12 years, pays in cash, first of every month, like clockwork. He gets the Seattle Times delivered, but he never reads it, just stacks them, unopened, in the corner. Don't ask him why. Don't ask him about the war. Room 212. That's the Sanderson sisters, 2 elderly twins. They'll complain about the noise from the ice machine, but the ice machine's been broken since '99. They're harmless. They just like having something to say. He went on like that, a catalog of quiet tragedies and peculiarities. But he saved room 309 for last. He stopped talking and just looked at the key rack, where the key for 309 was dangling from a hook, labeled out of service. What about 309? I asked. Marvin took a long drag. Fire damage. Before my time. Dawson's say it's not worth fixing. We don't rent it, ever. The way he said ever had a finality to it, like slamming a vault door. I was the manager. I figured I'd inspect it eventually. But Marvin's warning stuck with me. And in those early, busy months, I just never did. The rhythm of the place was simple, monotonous. I dealt with clogged toilets, petty theft from the vending machines, the occasional domestic dispute that would spill out of a room and into the parking lot. The police knew us by name. They'd show up, talk in low tones, take a report, and leave. Nothing ever stuck. The evergreen absorbed it all. The first crack in the mundane surface came with a guest named Elise. She checked into room 115, a standard nightly, paying with a credit card that barely went through. She was maybe 30, with the kind of exhausted eyes that looked a decade older. She had a small duffel bag and a nervous habit of tapping her wedding ring against the front desk. "Is it quiet?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Backside of the building is," I said. "Overlooks the woods. I'll take whatever's available," she said, not listening. She was listening to something else, something inside her own head. I gave her 115, which was on the front, facing the highway. She didn't complain. For 3 days, I'd see her smoking on the walkway outside her room, staring at the traffic like it was a river she needed to cross. On the 4th morning, she was at the desk again, her knuckles white on the counter. "I need to change rooms," she said. "Problem with 115. The phone," she stammered. "It rings in the middle of the night. And when I pick it up, there's just breathing, then a click." Internal calls weren't uncommon. Kids playing pranks, drunk guests dialing random rooms. I apologized, promised to look into it, and moved her to 207 on the back. She seemed relieved. 2 nights later, at about 2 a.m., my private line in the manager's apartment rang. It was Elise from 207. She was sobbing, hysterical. "He's in the walls," she choked out. "I can hear him scratching. He's telling me to open the door." I pulled on a jacket and went over. The night was cold and foggy, the kind that swallows sound. Her light was on. I knocked Elise. "It's Leo, the manager." The scratching stopped. After a moment, the door opened a crack, the chain still on. One bloodshot eye peered out. "Did you hear it?" she whispered. "I didn't hear anything, ma'am. Maybe it's the pipes, the wind in the eaves." She just stared at me, and I saw it then. A terror so complete it had eroded her sanity. This wasn't a prank. She was being hunted, and the predator was something only she could perceive. "I want my room facing the road again," she said, her voice flat now, drained. "Of course, let me get you a key." I moved her back to 115. She checked out at 6 a.m., leaving the key in the drop box. She never asked for a refund. When I went to clean the room later, it was spotless. The bed was made with military precision. The only trace of her was a single, long, dark hair coiled on the pillow, and the faint, sour smell of fear. I told Marvin about it over coffee the next evening. He just grunted, stirring 3 sugars into his cup. "The lodge gets in like that sometimes," he said, not looking up. "People running from something. Sometimes the thing they're running from checks in a few days later. Sometimes the thing was already here." Waiting room 207. "That's a bad one. Always has been. Faces the wrong way." "What does that mean?" I asked. He finally looked at me, his eyes watery and old. "It faces the woods, Leo, not the highway. Some folks need to see the way out when you can't." The woods start looking back. Elise's episode should have been a warning, but business was business. The Dawsons wanted heads in beds. I filed it away as a mental health crisis, a sad but isolated incident. Then came the traveler. He arrived in a vintage Cadillac, the color of a bruise. He was a large man, impeccably dressed in a suit that seemed too fine for our worn-out lobby. He had a voice like gravel rolling in honey. "A room for the weak, please. Top floor, if you have it. I enjoy the view." We only had one weekly vacancy on the third floor, 304, right next to the sealed up 309, I told him, hesitating. His smile never wavered. "Adjacent to Solitude." "Perfect." He paid in crisp $100 bills, his name on the register simply Mr. Allister. He was the perfect guest. Quiet, polite, left a generous tip for housekeeping. He'd leave in the morning, return late at night. I never saw him with luggage, just a small, polished leather doctor's bag. Things changed the week he arrived. Old man Henderson from 118 stopped collecting his newspapers. The stack by his door began to yellow in the damp. The Sandersons' sisters started complaining of a thumping in the walls, a rhythmic sound that came not from the ice machine, but from above, from the third floor. And then the dreams started. Not for me, at first, for the guests. A trucker, a regular named Big Dave, checked out abruptly after one night. He looked pale, clammy. When I asked if everything was okay, he shook his head. "Place is sick, man." Had a dream. I was in my room, but it was bigger, endless, and something was unfolding itself out of the closet, like a spider made of coat hangers and bad memories. Could smell it, like ozone and rotten meat. I wrote it off as bad chili from the diner next door. But then, a young couple, honeymooners on a budget, came down to the desk at 3 a.m., demanding a refund. The girl was crying. There was a man in our room, the husband said, angry and scared, standing at the foot of the bed, just watching us. He was tall, smiling. The door was locked from the inside. We had no record of a key for that room being duplicated. No sign of forced entry. I moved them, comped their stay, apologized profusely. The shadow of a tall man was seen in other rooms, always at the periphery, a dark shape in the fog of the parking lot, seen from a window. The scent of ozone began to linger in the second-floor hallway. It all orbited the third floor. It all orbited Mr. Allister. I knew I had to talk to him. One afternoon, I saw his Cadillac was gone. I took the master key and decided, finally, to do what I should have done on day one. Inspect room 309. The hallway on the third floor was colder. The faded floral carpet seemed to drink the light. The out-of-service sign on 309's door was dusty. I used my key. The lock turned with a heavy, reluctant clunk. The smell hit me first. Not fire, not mold. It was the dry, ancient smell of a sealed attic, of old paper and forgotten things. The room was a time capsule. The furniture was from the 70s, garish orange and brown patterns. The curtains were drawn, but thin daylight seeped in, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. There was no major fire damage, just a blackened scar on the carpet near the bathroom door and a water stain on the ceiling. But that wasn't what held me. The walls were covered in writing, not graffiti, not angry scrawls. It was neat, cursive writing in what looked like black ink or maybe charcoal. It covered every inch of wall space, from the baseboards to the ceiling. Sentences, paragraphs, looping and weaving into one another. I stepped closer, my heart thudding against my ribs. He does not sleep. He harvests the quiet hours. The space between waking and dreaming is a corridor, and he walks. The key is not metal. It is consent, offered in fear. 309 is not a room, it is a throat. It was a litany of terror. A documentation. Some passages described nightmares in vivid detail. The spider thing of coat hangers. The smiling tall man. Other parts were like a manual or a warning. I saw the name Henderson appear several times, linked to phrases about debt and standing guard. I saw references to the sisters who hear, the growth in the walls. This was the lodge's secret history, its true ledger, and it was all about him, about the thing that used this room, that maybe was summoned by whatever happened here. A floorboard creaked behind me. I whirled around. Mr. Allister stood in the open doorway, his frame filling it. He wasn't smiling now. His expression was one of mild, academic disappointment. "Curiosity, Mr. Manager," he said, his gravel-honey voice filling the small room. "A necessary trait for your species, and so often fatal." "What is this?" I managed to say, gesturing at the walls. My voice was thin. "A guest registry," he replied, stepping inside. He didn't seem to walk so much as the room drew him in. A record of services rendered. My predecessor was sentimentally inclined. "I prefer a cleaner operation." "Your predecessor, the one who made the original compact, the one who started the fire to cover a different kind of consumption." He looked at the blackened scar on the floor. "Messy. I am more refined. I trade in subtler currencies." He was close to me now. I could smell him sandalwood, and beneath it, that same ozone smell. "What do you want?" I whispered. "What I've always wanted from this charming establishment. Sustenance. This place is a crossroads, Leo. A place of transient souls, frayed emotions, potent dreams. Fear is a delicacy. Despair is a vintage. You have been an excellent steward of my larder." The realization coiled in my gut, cold and heavy. The long-term residents. They weren't just hiding. They were, what? Tributes, anchors. "Henderson," I breathed, "pays his rent in the memories I don't take from him," Allister confirmed. "The Sandersons, their constant listening tunes the walls for me, makes the whispers clearer. Every soul here, in some small way, feeds the ecology. And you, the good manager, you keep the system running, quiet and full." As requested, I thought I was going to be sick. I had been a groundskeeper in a garden of sorrow, and I hadn't even known it. "It ends now," I said, with no force at all. "Does it?" He raised an eyebrow. "Tell the police. They will see a distressed manager and a charming guest. Have me evicted. I am a tenant with a lease written in older laws. Burn it down. The Dawsons would have questions. And the things that live here, they would simply find a new hotel. Perhaps one in your hometown." The threat was unspoken but absolute. This was my life now. I was part of the machinery. What do I do? The question was a surrender. "You do what you have always done," he said, his smile returning. "You manage, you ensure the quiet, you direct the unruly elements, like poor Elise, to where they can be of use, or where they can leave without causing a scene. You are not a bad man, Leo. You are a practical one. That is why you were chosen." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And do seal this room back up. The draft is unpleasant." He was gone. I stood in the silent written-on tomb, the words on the walls seeming to pulse in the dim light. I had stumbled into a secret world, and the price of knowing was complicity. Life at the Evergreen didn't change. My perception of it did. Every check-in became a moral calculation. The lonely elderly person, potential long-term fodder, the arguing family, a burst of emotional energy, the scared woman fleeing an abusive husband, a concentrated dose of the very fear Mr. Allister savored. I saw him less, but felt him always. The smell of ozone was his calling card. The nightmares among the guests became more frequent, more shared. Big Dave the trucker stopped coming altogether. I heard through the diner gossip he'd gotten a day job and refused to drive our stretch of highway. The final descent began with a new long-termer, a young man named Caleb. He was a programmer, he said, working remote. He took room 210. He had the hollow look of someone running, but not from another person, from himself, from a grief or a guilt he wouldn't name. He was perfect, and I knew it. So did he. Mr. Allister took a particular interest. He'd bump into Caleb in the parking lot, engaging him in conversations that left Caleb looking more drained each time. I'd see them through the office window, Allister talking, Caleb staring at his shoes, shoulders slumped. Then Caleb stopped coming out. His do not disturb sign stayed on his door for 4 days. The rule said I should check. The new horrible knowledge I carried screamed at me to leave it alone. On the 5th day, the sign was gone. The room was empty. Not just vacant, empty. All of Caleb's things, his laptops, his clothes, were gone. The bed was made. The room smelled strongly of ozone and a weird, coppery sweetness. And on the desk, neatly centered, was a stack of $100 bills, exactly 6 months' rent in advance, and a single, handwritten note on Evergreen Lodge stationery. For room 210. Quiet tenant, no fuss. It was signed with a single. Elegant Caleb was gone. Not checked out. Gone. And I had his money. I stood there, the bills in my hand, feeling like strips of his skin. This was the transaction. This was the business. I couldn't do it. The complicity had been a weight, but this was an anchor, dragging me down into a blackness I knew I'd never escape. I had to know what happened. I had to try, even if it was futile. I waited until the dead of night, until the lodge was as still as it ever got. I took my master key and went to the one place I knew held answers, room 300. I didn't turn on the light. I used a flashlight. The writing on the walls seemed to have multiplied, new lines weaving between the old. I scanned them, looking for anything about disappearance or the quiet tenant, and then I saw it. A fresh patch of writing, still seeming to gleam wet in the beam. The harvest is not of the body, but of the echo. The man of sorrows, see, carried a hollow place within him, a room already empty. He was shown the architecture of his own grief. He walked into its expanse and did not return. The space he occupied is now a vacancy that sings, a fine vintage. He hadn't killed Caleb. He had curated him. He'd found the emptiness inside the man and simply expanded it until Caleb vanished into his own despair. I heard a floorboard creak in the hallway, not outside my door, outside the room next door, 308, which was empty. The scratching started then, a soft, persistent scraping of metal on wood, coming from within the wall I shared with 308, no, from within the space between the walls. A voice, thin and frayed, seeped through the plaster. It was Caleb's voice. Leo, manager, can you hear me? It's bigger in here. So much bigger than the room I've been walking. I can see the lights from the other rooms. like little windows in the dark. But the doors are all wrong. Horror, cold and pure, flooded me. He wasn't dead. He was lost, trapped in the non-space the thing had shown him, wandering the expanded, nightmare geometry of his own grief within the walls of the lodge. He says I can leave when I find the right door. Caleb's voice wept, but they all look like my father's face. I pressed my hand against the wall. It was ice cold. Caleb, I'm here. I'll get help. No help, the voice whispered, fading. No help, only the menu. We're all on the menu. Leo, you're just a waiter. The scratching faded. The silence that followed was worse. I stumbled out of 309, locked it, and vomited in the hallway. I had to end this. I couldn't manage this horror for one more day. My plan was stupid, desperate. I would go to the Dawsons. I would tell them everything, show them the room, the writing. I'd risk them thinking I was insane, risk losing my job and my home. Anything was better than this. I called the number in Florida. Mrs. Dawson answered, her voice brittle and far away. Mrs. Dawson, it's Leo at the Evergreen. I need to talk to you and your husband. It's urgent. It's about room 309 and one of our long-term guests, a Mr. Allister. There was a long silence on the line. Then a different voice came on, older, drier. Mr. Dawson, Allister, you say? He croaked. Yes, sir. He's not what he seems. There are things happening here. I found writing in 309. We know about the writing, son. Mr. Dawson interrupted, his voice devoid of surprise. Marvin sends us pictures every time new lines appear. It's how we track the activity. The world tilted, you know. Of course we know, he sighed, a sound like dry leaves. My father built the lodge in '63. He made a deal, a bad one, with a bad thing, to keep the business afloat during a recession. The fire in '75 was an attempt to break it. It didn't work. It just changed the management. Alistair is the new one, more professional. The old one was needlessly cruel. I couldn't speak. The owners, they were not victims. They were landlords in a far more literal sense. The arrangement is simple, Leo Dawson continued, his tone turning firm, managerial. He keeps to the long-term wing. Mostly, he brings a certain stability, a reduction in problem guests, and the revenue from his endeavors is significant. It's what pays your salary. It's what keeps the roof over your head and the taxes paid. He took a man, I whispered into the phone, a man named Caleb. He's in the walls. Another pause. Then he was a suitable candidate. Listen to me, son. You have two choices. You can continue as manager with a fuller understanding and a 15% raise, effective immediately. You become a conscious partner. Or you can leave. Tonight, we will provide a generous severance. But if you leave, you never speak of this. Not to anyone. You go far away, and you pray that the new manager he chooses to collaborate with is as competent as you've been. It was a buyout, a bribe, or a threat, wrapped in the same paper. And if I go to the police, to the press, Mr. Dawson's voice dropped to a poisonous whisper, then we will show them the security footage of you accepting 6 months cash, rent for a room from which a young man vanished. We will share the emails where you expressed concerns about Caleb's mental state. We will paint you as a grifter who took advantage of a vulnerable tenant, who then, in his depression, likely wandered into the woods. And who do you think they'll believe? The respected retired couple in Florida, or the disgraced, middle-aged hotel manager with a disappearance on his watch? The trap was perfect. I had been inside it since the day I took the job. The severance, I heard myself say. How much? He named a figure. It was enough to leave, to get an apartment somewhere else, to start over, however tainted. I'll have Marvin bring you the paperwork and a cashier's check by morning, Dawson said, his voice returning to its dry normalcy. Clean out your apartment. Be gone by checkout time. And Leo, it's been a pleasure. You really were the best manager we've ever had. The line went dead. I left the Evergreen Lodge at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. The sky was the color of wet cement. I put my last box in my car and took one look back at the 3-story U-shaped building. In the window of 304, the third floor, I saw a tall, dark silhouette. It didn't wave. It just watched me go. I drove until the rain and the pine trees blurred together. I used the severance to move to a small city hundreds of miles away. I got a job at a hardware store. I live a quiet, anonymous life, but some nights, when the wind is right, I swear I can smell ozone. And I have dreams, not my own dreams. I dream I'm walking a long, carpeted hallway that stretches forever. The walls are lined with doors, each with a peephole. And if I look through them, I see the faces of the guests. Elise, smoking endlessly. Big Dave, staring at his hands. Caleb lost and weeping in an infinite dark. And Mr. Alistair, standing at the end of the hall, smiling, holding his leather doctor's bag. He's waiting for my rent to come due. I don't know what happened to Marvin or the Dodsons. I don't know if the lodge still stands. All I know is that some places aren't built on land. They're built on a kind of hunger. And once you've worked in the kitchen, you can never forget the taste of what's on the menu. You just pray you're never served it yourself. A story about a haunted hotel isn't about ghosts. It's about the living people who become part of the haunting. The ones who change the sheets, who cash the checks, who hear the noises and decide, for the sake of a quiet night, to pretend they didn't. Thanks for listening. Click that notification bell. I release new videos every Monday and Thursday. If you have a story, be sure to submit it. And if you want to support the channel, check the links in the description below. And show of hands, how many of you will be checking the peephole twice tonight?